in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of WordStream and Influence & Co., I'd like to thank you all for attending our webinar, 10 Rules for Guaranteed Content Downloads. Looks like people are still joining the webinar, so we're going to stay on mute for the next minute or so and give folks a chance to catch up. Back in a flash. Good afternoon once again. Thank you all for joining us on behalf of WordStream and Influencer Co. Welcome to 10 Rules for Guaranteed Content Downloads. Over the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to share tactics, trends, and true life examples of creating and promoting content to drive business results. We'd like to invite you to participate in the conversation by using the question feature in the GoToWebinar panel to your right. Please submit your questions as they come up, and at the end of our session, we'll be sure to answer as many as we can. The webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be emailed to everyone who registered tomorrow, Friday the 23rd. And now to our speakers. Natalie Stezovsky comes to us from Influencer Co., where she's the vice president, and Mark Irvine comes to us from WordStream, where he's the senior data scientist. I'll let them take it from here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Aaron, for the great introduction. Really thrilled to be here today. Really thrilled to be here with Natalie. We spent a lot of time working on this. I know that both of us are specifically working with our clients on a regular basis around not just how do they get online, but how do they manage this giant project that is content creation and content management and then content promotion around the entire spectrum of what do I do with this giant project. So Natalie and I are going to spend some time going through some 10 rules of engagement in terms of how to run this. And so Natalie,
Yep.
you're going to start them off with some solid baseline, right?
Yeah, yep, absolutely. Can you guys hear me okay?
We
Yep.
can.
Awesome. No, really excited to be collaborating with the WordStream team and Mark sharing this dialogue with you. As I mentioned, I'm a vice president here at Influence & Co. I've been with them for close to 6 years now and have been living, breathing, and creating content throughout that entire time. So it's been a really exciting journey to see the evolution of content from where it was 6 years ago to where it is today, and then where it's going to be in the future. So as I mentioned, we're going to kind of be talking through those 10 rules for making content more effective. Where I'm really going to focus on is looking at how to create that effective content, how to make sure that you're creating like the right type of content to accomplish some of those specific goals, what type of metrics we should also be looking at, and going from there. So why don't we start first with talking about this practice of idea communication. Really, when we're looking at idea communication, it is really surrounding the notion of creating a piece of content that's going to be industry leading. It is going to be data driven, it is going to be educational, and it is going to be amusing. So if we want to switch to that slide, we can kind of go through what that is specifically looking like on our end, because it's key to understand what this rule for communication is as kind of like a baseline when creating every single article that you're looking at. So let's dive into industry leading for an example. So this is where we're wanting to make sure that your ideas are innovative and new. It's not something that you can just find anywhere on the internet from anyone else. You really want to start to have that unique perspective, and you don't want to rehash information that has been conveyed a million times. So do some of that research. Has this piece of information been talked about online before? What perspective have they brought to the table, and what perspective are you going to bring to the table, so that you're not adding to the noise of content that's already out there. The second point here is really looking at data-driven content. So if you're making a claim within your content, making sure that you're backing that up with supportive data, including links back to the claims that you're making, only to make sure that your content is trustworthy and credible. Educational, above all, that is the entire point of content. Like, you want it to educate your consumers, and as the face of your company, it's up to you to spread education about your industry so that your audience can gain that knowledge directly from the source and not from your competitors. Again, you kind of want to be seen as that go-to resource within your industry. And the fourth point that we really think of when developing content is making it amusing, making it exciting. You want it to be consumable. You want it to be easy to engage with. Are you having fun with it? And is it showcasing not only the individual's personality that's writing it, but also the personality of your organization? That's something that, one, it helps humanize your brand. It makes your pieces more memorable, and something that your audience enjoys reading. So you want it to make it an exciting read. And so those are some of the four principles that we look at when developing a single piece of content. So kind of having that mindset before you develop an article. Going to the next slide, this is really something that should also be thought about from the very beginning, is setting the goals that you want to accomplish with your content. If you are just producing a piece of content to say, hey, I published this article and we're good to go, you're going to lose at the content marketing game. You really need to understand, what is the overall purpose? Is it lead generation, where I want to, again, capture leads through content that I'm creating? Is it to establish yourself as a thought leader within the industry? Are you wanting to create content to improve your SEO? So really beginning to ask yourselves in the beginning, before you even dive into your content strategy, what do you want success to look like? What do you want success to look like in 3 months, in 6 months, in a year, and even beyond that? And that's something that is definitely going to be changing over time. Also thinking through, if somebody is reading a piece of content that I am pushing out, whether that's a blog article, whether that's a guest contributed content, whether that's a more encompassing piece of content like an ebook or a white paper, what do you want them to get out of it? When they read a piece, what do you want them walking away from that article feeling? What is the desired action that you want them to take? So those are definitely some questions to be thinking about. And honestly, this setting your goals from day one is what's going to set you up for success in the long term. And I think it's looking at it from an overall perspective of like, what do you want this content marketing campaign to accomplish? But then even breaking it down even further to each individual piece of content that you're creating and what you want that single article to accomplish as well, and how that fits into the bigger picture. So we're going to dive into these three specific areas over the next few minutes here, but we're going to start with lead generation specifically. Lead generation from content marketing is thinking all about the consumer journey with content. You kind of have three stages of the funnel where we're looking at the top of the funnel, which is where you're going to educate, you're going to bring awareness. You might be showing, talking about trends within the industry. You might be showing kind of the problem in the industry that people need to be thinking about. You have the middle funnel of content, which is really where you're going to nurture your specific audiences around different solutions they can be thinking about. And again, giving them the information to make better decisions. That's going to look a lot like blog posts. And then we have the bottom of the funnel, which is really where we're going to engage and capture some of those different leads with pieces like gated content, where somebody's actually having to enter in their information to download a piece of content as well. So as we go through the next couple of slides, I just want to talk through some examples of what some of our clients have done here at Influence & Co. I think the biggest area that you need to look at, and honestly, this is around every type of piece of content that you're creating, is making sure that they're aligned. Making sure that if you are creating like a guest contributed content like what we have here in front of you, so this article was published in Entrepreneur, this specific company wanted to reach that audience, that this article relates back to some piece of content that you have on your site. And so again, you're aligning that specifically. And when you think of that funnel, if you will, that's how you guys are going to really start to see those leads generate through, because you're creating a seamless process for them. You're helping move them from one stage to the other, which I think is really key here. So guest contributed content would definitely be considered top of the funnel content. This is where you're getting your expertise out into reputable media publications, looking at different types of media publications where like your potential decision makers and potential buyers are reading, and serving up a piece of content that you're writing, you're controlling, that's helping educate them around specific topics within the area. If we look at press mentions, for instance, this is where you're getting that third-party credibility and starting to create buzz and excitement around your brand. So this could be something where it's a reference to your organization in some type of capacity, whether you're being quoted, whether you're being included in a list like what you're seeing here in front as well. But again, this is really where you're starting to get like that third-party credibility, some more of that traditional PR activities. And again, making sure that you understand how these two pieces, the guest contributed articles and the press mentions at the top of the funnel, are relating to every other piece of content that you're creating. So if we go to the next slide, this is where we really start to look at on-site content. So this is something where this blog post was actually linked to in a guest contributed article by this client. So we could, again, kind of naturally create that alignment there. And if somebody wanted to dive into that topic even further, they were being directed to this client's site and reading content that kind of dove in a little bit further. This is something where the blog content on your site needs to be filled with educational resources so that leads visiting your site are getting the information that helps them answer questions also is building trust with you that you are kind of the expert within your field and are beginning to learn more about you. So then if we dive into the next element where we talk about gated content, and this is ultimately how you're going to be capturing a lead's information. And so in the previous slide, the article is talking about breathing life back into retro games with virtual reality technology. That was an initial blog post that was being written. And what we did at the end is we actually had a call to action to download this longer form piece of gated content, which talks about how will your company use AR and VR to explore new worlds. They go into depth on that specific subject matter, but then they also start to give a picture of why this specific company would be a solution to that. So when we're looking at the gated content, this is where you can quote unquote sell a little bit more. You still want to be educational, but this is something where, again, they have to enter in their contact information to get this specific piece of content that kind of helps that as well. And then even going through, okay, now that they've entered in their contact information, they've downloaded this one piece of content, what does that consistent nurture look like? And this is really where email can come into play. So creating a drip campaign around, somebody who's downloaded a longer form gated piece of content with a call to action to maybe it's to get on the phone, or maybe it's to interact in a webinar that they're doing. That'll kind of be determined by you. But again, content marketing is really all about how do you stay top of mind, and how do you kind of move people from the educate and the aware stage through the nurture stage, through the engage stage, and stay top of mind. So when they are ready to make a decision, you're the first person that pops into mind. So there's a psychology there that you play with a little bit when you're thinking of content. And that's really where consistency comes into play. And if you go back to thinking through your initial goals and what you want to get out of your content marketing efforts, consistency should be throughout. And when you do have a plan, usually that's involved with all of that. And so that's kind of the psychology and walking through somebody through kind of an ideal content funnel and making sure everything is aligned, from the email newsletters to the gated piece of content to the blog post to maybe the press mention or the guest contributed article that is living offsite as well. And what Mark's going to dive into here in a couple of slides is really how to get the most out of some of this published content, which I think will be a really nice transition. Kind of jumping ships a little bit, I also want to talk through success metrics. There's a lot of different ways you can be looking at success from a content capacity, both from a quantitative perspective and a qualitative perspective. These various factors on the screen in front of you are really going to help you determine if your content is actually generating leads for your company. Keeping track of your average lead score is going to help you determine if you're improving lead count over time. Clickbacks to your website will help you notice if people are actually reading your guest contributed articles enough to want to click further and go to your site and engage with your brand even more. Your conversion percentage will help you indicate if the leads coming back to your site are actually opting into your content. There's even things that you can look at, such as heat maps. You can start to understand how engaged people are with the content, how far they are reading, how long they're spending on a piece of content, kind of what is their like progressive profile, if you will, of what type of content they're clicking on, what type of content is resonating with each specific post. So those are some success metrics that you can definitely look at from a lead generation perspective. There's obviously some qualitative metrics that go into that, which include, how can you leverage some of this content within your sales cycle? If you have a lead or a potential customer that has barriers around a specific topic, and you're in active conversations with them, how can you leverage that conversation how can you leverage that piece of content in a conversation to maybe alleviate the barrier that they're facing? How can you use it to shorten up the sales cycle. Maybe somebody is trying to compare you to another competitor. Obviously talking through that on the phone, but if you have a supporting piece of content that kind of helps showcase your approach in the marketplace, those all just kind of like they're reinforcements and tools in your toolkit like during your sales process. So those are some of the different things to think about from a success metrics perspective. And then there's also technical requirements as well when you're looking at content from a lead generation perspective. Obviously having a website CMS and a blog that seems pretty standard, but also looking at marketing automation systems like a HubSpot or even a Marketo, so you can track how leads are engaging with you, and you can start building your buyer personas and your specific drip campaigns for every persona that you might have, so you can get more targeted with your content. There's also sales CRM systems. HubSpot also has a sales CRM system, but then there's also companies like Coho or Salesforce, which I'm sure multiple of you guys are familiar with as well. Then we can also look at some of the backend analytics, Google Analytics, for instance, to kind of see what the traffic flow is looking like. What are some of those traffic sources that you're having as well, and things of that nature. And then obviously a social following. When we talk about a social following, that's really more of like a validation and kind of like a check mark of how are they engaged on their different social channels, whether that's LinkedIn, whether that is Twitter, whether that is Facebook or Pinterest or Instagram. All of those different things are going to aid in supporting this like lead generation goal that you have. But there's a lot of different tools out there that you can use, but these are kind of like the 5 standard things that we need to be thinking about from a technical perspective when you're wanting to create content and convert leads. If we jump to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit more about when your goal for content is around thought leadership. There's definitely some overlap between thought leadership content and lead generation content. When we're looking at thought leadership content, again, that is more top of the funnel content for the most part. So I mean, like, to establish thought leadership content, these are the types of deliverables that you should honestly be focusing on in your strategy. So if we look at guest contributed content, if we look at press mentions, blog content, email newsletters, books as well. You know, if it's something where you're looking to get like potential speaking engagements, a lot of conference organizers want published authors, and that's really kind of adding to your kind of like thought leadership platform. So if you look at all of those different types of deliverables, those are some of the things to take into consideration when looking at all of those. And again, this is more of like that top of the funnel content, if you will. So if we dive into some of the success metrics as well, sorry, skipping ahead another page. This is, again, similar to what we're looking at from a lead generation perspective. We can look at finish rate on articles. We can look at social engagement. We can look at how this content is being syndicated, looking at organic brand building opportunities, such as, you know, are you getting partnerships out of this? Are you being approached? Are you being approached by conference organizers to potentially speak? Are people reaching out to you and wanting to quote you or get advice on the industry? So those are some different success metrics to look at. And then also from a technical perspective, not terribly different than the lead generation perspective. This again is a little bit more of the beginning stages, so you might not have to have you know, a marketing automation platform or, you know, a Salesforce, if you will. Granted, we would definitely recommend those types of tools, but you can look at analytics to see those trackback traffic. You can also look at the social media engagement. How are your social profiles growing? And then obviously email automation systems, if you guys are sending out some of those different email campaigns as well. And then really kind of going from here, the third goal that I want to talk about is SEO. Honestly, from an SEO perspective, when you want to be ranking better for content or keywords that you're looking at, my honest opinion and the way that Google is looking at this is when you're developing a piece of content, get in the mindset of how am I going to provide value to the end reader versus thinking, how am I going to get this article to convert leads for me? When you switch that mentality when you're developing a piece of content, that's automatically going to be better in Google's eyes, and you're going to create content for the end consumer that's going to be of value to them. So obviously when we're looking at different types of SEO tactics here, backlinks is a big one. We want to look at, okay, what types of publications or media outlets in the digital space do we want to be targeting so that we can get quality backlinks to your site? But again, still having the mentality of I want to create high quality content first and figure out how can I distribute this to audiences externally that are going to resonate with the content that I'm creating. The second thing that I want to talk about from an SEO perspective is making sure that your own site is set up from a technical perspective so that your content can actually be found. So something that we'll talk a lot about with clients is technical audits. So, you know, making sure that you've set a foundation on your site. You know, small technical issues on your website can make your future efforts like less impactful. So for instance, if you have like broken internal links, if there are sitemap issues, if there are issues with the HTTPS. So all of those things you definitely want to be looking at to make sure that, again, your content can actually be found on your site as well. And then something else which we could probably spend an entire day talking about is keywords. And this is really understanding what are people searching for and how can I relate some of those key terms into the content that I am creating so that when people are searching those key terms, my content is popping up as well. So a tool that we use here at Influence & Co. Is Moz. And so one of the keywords that we want to rank for is thought leadership, because that's kind of where we focus on. And so this is a great tool to see, okay, what is the monthly volume of searches for this specific key term? What is the difficulty in terms of ranking for that specific key term, and what's the priority level as well? So I think it's really important to routinely check the keywords that you want to be ranking for. Keep an eye on your company's search visibility and your organic search traffic to your site. And if all of that continues to increase, then you definitely know that you're going down the right path. But Moz is a great tool for that too. But I'm sure we could probably spend an entire day talking about SEO, but I think it's really key to think about SEO from the perspective of, again, content is meant to educate. So how can I naturally incorporate key terms that somebody is searching for around my area of expertise into the content so that when people are searching for that, my content and my resources are popping up to educate them, to hopefully help them make better decisions and choose you guys in the end. So kind of moving forward, and Mark, this is really kind of where I think your forte is coming into play. But once you guys have began developing content, really talking through getting more out of your content, which Mark is definitely going to dive into. So Mark, I'll let you kind of take it from here and talk through some of your key points.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Natalie. Obviously, as we begin this conversation, you've gone out there and you're building a lot of content. It's so much that I'm sure of all people, Natalie, you're familiar with this. This can be a large task when you first start.
Yes. Yes.
Just even in those three simple goals, as you talk about multi-touch within your own funnel, the top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, There's a lot of objectives that you can have for each piece of content, and it's difficult, and it can often be frustrating if you're out there creating all of this content to just continue to bust through content, and sometimes it's going to be very successful, sometimes it's not going to be very successful.
Yep.
How do you scale, and how do you even identify that best content to begin with? So as we begin to talk about, you're out there, you're creating this content, it's ranking for you, people are viewing it, what's some of the things we can do? So as you create this external content, be that guest created content, be that personal reviews, be that press mentions, even syndicated content, anything that isn't specifically on your site, well, that's really great if people are out there, they're reading about you on these other influencer platforms, whether or not that's your own site or user-generated content or what have you. But of course, that's resources that you've dropped into getting someone to visit this type of content. And so if you're written this content and it's this 9 reasons to visit Florida kind of content, and obviously at the end of the day, you're hoping that some people are going to read this. There's likely going to be a backlink to your site. You're going to get some people organically to your site. But what are some ways that we can amplify the reach of this content? And how can we get more people than who might just organically be reading this content to get to our site? First thing that we're going to want to do whenever we're talking about this kind of external content is identify what the real opportunity here is. What is our best performing content? Here I'm looking at just within Google Analytics. If we go under the acquisition and we look at all of our referral traffic, it's very possible for us to view, okay, here's exactly where people are reading about us online. Here's how many people are coming to our site. But most importantly, after they come to our site from these sources, well, what does our goal completion rate look like? How many people are signing up for a trip after viewing this particular article on this particular domain? It's really easy here to really quickly identify what our opportunity here is. So I can see the fact, like right now, 15,000 people coming to this particular client site via travelzoo.com. That content on travelzoo.com, that's very clearly doing well for us, that not only guides how we go about creating content or where we go about creating content in the future, but it can also then begin to strategize what we do in terms of ads. So for instance, if I created that content, again, 9 reasons to visit Florida in 2018, this is actually a very perfect place in my own content on this other site. I may choose to buy a display ad directly in that content itself. So here in this list of 9 reasons to visit Florida, right after number 1, there's this it's a subtle nod, it's a subtle ad, but it's to get you to specifically come to this Universal Studios page. So that if you're already devoted to reading this content online, you've already found this, you're already clearly in market for this type of product, certainly you might ultimately click on a referral link or a backlink via this content itself, but there's no shame in also throwing a few ads in that content as well. If this is an audience that's important for you to get in front of, there's no shame to paying to get in front of that audience again. And best of all is these display ads. This is not necessarily something that is going to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. This isn't you making a TV media buy. These type of display ads average a total of 63 cents USD per click. And generally, this type of placement on the display network within relevant content to you has a click-through rate of 0.46%. So of course, there are going to be some people who read your content. You're not going to pay for them to click through. Always happy to get organic traffic. This is not a debate of organic or paid. This can be an organic and paid conversation altogether. And if this is just getting you a couple hundred more people to your site, costs a couple $100, and really it's a great audience to get in front of because they're already engaged with your content and they're already clearly converting with this type of content as is. Fastest way to scale your existing content is just get more people to your site from it. And so next, as we talk about identifying our best content, it's important to also think about our best audiences for our content. and also for ads in the same conversation. So regardless of whether or not your content is primarily based on your own site, or whether or not that is that user-generated content, or whether or not that's external thought leadership content, what have you, at the end of the day, hopefully people are coming to your site. And it might surprise you exactly who is coming to your site. So one of the big things that really blew this idea open for me was a recent Think with Google study. It asks you to rethink your key audiences. If you're selling baby products, a lot of people are going to think of the new mom, new dad kind of audience for that. But a recent Think with Google study revealed that 40% of all baby product purchases live in households without children. So this idea that the consumer and the customer might be slightly different personas along the way, that getting this insight into who these key decision makers are, who's going to ultimately buy your product, might shift your entire content strategy and your ad strategy along the way. And this isn't necessarily just something that exists within this particular vertical. I recently had a client, they sell shampoo. And shampoo, whenever you talk about content for shampoo, or whenever you talk about an ad for shampoo, if you think about a shampoo ad that you've seen in the last decade, you have this vision of this woman in a shower, and she's having the greatest shower of her life. And it's always catered specifically to that female audience. So it's very natural that we're going to go in there as marketers, as oftentimes we're going to hear these voices in the room, in our audience, and we're going to have some assumptions about who our key audiences are, and that could be wrong. So we might want to use Google Analytics. Google Analytics is going to give us some demographic information about the people who are on our site already and how they're currently performing. So again, within Google Analytics, this is under your Audiences tab. Under demographics, there's a lot of insight in terms of age, gender, parental status, a number of particular elements about who your users are on your site. And you'll be able to view metrics along these gender, these age, these demographic guidelines in terms of who's coming to your site and what they're doing while they're on their site. And so this shampoo company, yep, they're 100% correct in their initial assumption that most of these people who are coming to their site, most of these people who are looking for shampoo, well, they are female, but men make up 7% of their visitors. But what's probably more important for them to think about is what these men are doing when they're on the site. We actually discovered when we looked at their e-commerce conversion rate that men were over 50% more likely to convert when they get to this site. So the men, although they make up a minority of people who come to this site, when they come to this site, they come with clear intention along the way. So this conversion rate of women converting at about 3% to men converting at about 4.5%, that can mean something very seriously for how we write content for these different demographics. And also, most importantly, when we actually look at what this revenue looks like, well, again, although men make up a small minority of traffic to the site, they make up about a third of all the revenue that comes to the site. Because it looks like men, when they do make this purchase, which they make more frequently on the site, they also make these appreciably larger purchases, and they spend about 4 times as much per transaction when they're on the site. So it would be very easy for us as marketers to come in with this assumption about who our key audiences are and write all of our content for them. But in doing so, without looking at the data, we'd be missing out on this huge segment of what revenue looks like and how we could potentially scale this hugely valuable audience of men who also have hair, who also need shampoo. So thinking about your key audiences will also change the way in which you ultimately target your content and target your ads online. So as we talk about how you promote your content, demographic targeting, it's available across all of our major social networks, but it's also something that is underutilized, criminally underutilized on the search and the display networks within Google AdWords and Bing Ads. So within all of our ad platforms, we have the same kind of visibility that we have within Google Analytics for what people are doing on our site. And we could begin to use this insight from who is currently on our site, who's currently engaging with our ads, who's currently engaging with our content, to then make some smarter decisions about how we create our ads for these audiences. So previously, earlier this year, I was running this promotion for one of our florist clients. And so it reads, special Valentine's Day gifts ad, 100% smile guaranteed, spend $100 and get a free box of chocolates to sweeten up his or her day. So that's a fairly good ad. However, the big objection I had to this type of content is the fact that that his or her day, that reads fairly impersonal, fairly intentionally impersonal. So what we did is we tested that ad against two other variations of that ad. One we only showed to men, the other we only showed to women, and we made one small change in each of these ads. The ad that men saw read, find the perfect gift for her, box of chocolates to sweeten up her day. And we showed the exact same ad to women with a small change. We just changed out that opposite gender pronoun. Women saw an ad that read, find the perfect gift for him, spend $100 and get a free box of chocolates to sweeten up his day. So small semantic change in terms of how this ad is actually written itself. But that small semantic change made all the difference in how this kind of content performed online. So whereas that generic ad had a 7.3% click-through rate, a 1.8% conversion rate, this small variance of the ad with one word changed, men were clicking through that ad at about 11.6%, women at about 9.25%. So all said and done, that improved the click-through rate for these audiences by 60 and 30% respectively. But in both cases, probably the bigger story here is that more than doubled the conversion rate just by changing one word within this ad. So just without changing the offer, without changing our prices, without offering free shipping, without doing anything except for changing one word into this ad, by speaking more directly to who's reading this content, we were able to double this conversion rate, which is fantastic. It's going to make a huge difference in terms of lead gen, in terms of your bottom line, and ultimately in terms of revenue. And so finally, as you're driving all of this new traffic to your site, you want to think about how you're nurturing your visitors and how remarketing can play into this. And so remarketing, if you're not overly familiar with this, we know that not everyone who comes to our site on the first time, if we're doing our job well, our median search conversion rate is going to be 3.7%. We see that across multiple thousands of accounts. But even if we're doing better than average, even if we're in their top 10% or the top 1%, we've got an 11.3% conversion rate or 22.9% conversion rate. Well, at the end of the day, that top 1%, these people who are absolutely killing the conversion rate on their site, even the best people in the industry don't convert their audiences the majority of the time. So even as we talk about making these incremental improvements to what people are doing on our sites, at the end of the day, we still have to come to terms with the fact that most people, 93% of all the visitors to your site, won't complete your goal on their first visit. So if I want to make sure that I was thinking about nurturing people, not just to do the original thing that I want them to do on my site, but how I re-engage with them on subsequent searches or as they're still in market for this, the big prize on the table comes into this 93% of people who do not immediately take the action I'm looking for them to do. And so remarketing is a powerful tool in this. So this is a tool that as someone views my content, they get engaged with my brand or they get engaged with my site, I can follow them of my content, reminding them of my offer, reminding them for my particular product or service on a stay front of mind for that. Part about this is remarketing. As you engage with that valuable audience, we actually see that, like all ads do fatigue over time, but remarketing ads have an initially higher engagement rate, but they also fatigue at about half the rate of other ad types. So whereas normally you show someone an ad and you continuously show someone the same ad again and again, they're less likely to engage with this. remarketing, we see the fact that someone who's seen an ad 7 times before is still about 60% as likely to engage with that ad as they were the first time, whereas that is not true of other types of ad targeting. So there is not that kind of fatigue or that resistance to remarketing ads that we typically see. In fact, we actually see that exposure has a very productive use to it, even if people aren't engaging with these ads specifically. Someone who sees this ad once or twice, well, just by showing them that ad a second time, now if they do come back to the site, they're actually 60% more likely to ultimately convert, because when they come back to that site, they now have that intent. You've reminded them over a period of time that this is specifically something that they do in fact need. But by being persistent and staying in front of their face, by showing someone an ad 6 times, well, you'll actually see that someone who sees an ad 6 times across multiple networks, across multiple devices, when they do come back to the site, they're actually more than twice as likely to convert as that first time that they saw an ad. So even if this is something that you're not getting necessarily a whole lot of net new traffic, this is something that you can use to nurture your existing traffic along the way. And this does not necessarily just need to be about how you're engaging with your existing audiences who are viewing your content. As you're out there, as you're getting email lists from your email marketing campaigns or from gated content, or as you're out at events and you're getting business cards, or you've got even a traditional mailing campaign, all of this particular prospect contact information can be re-leveraged in either a customer match audience or a customer audience on Facebook, that in which you can re-engage them via this type of remarketing without them necessarily even viewing your online content itself. And we see that by targeting more specific, highly engaged audiences, as you'd expect, more engaged audiences, people who have been to your site before or who have begun to either abandon their shopping cart or have purchased from you in the past, or these people who have given you their contact information, well, those hot leads, as you'd expect, those are the highest conversion audiences when they do come back to your site. That just by thinking about how you target your ads or how you target your content to people online, that in itself can be enough to move the needle significantly, and in many cases, increase the conversion rate by 300% on average here, just by thinking about who is reading your ads online. And so with that, I definitely do want to save some time for Q&A, but Natalie, I believe that we both have some offers for our guests today.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mark, just the way that you ended that conversation, I mean, I think content today, whether you're developing a white paper or a blog post or targeted ads like you were talking about, it's all about like personalization and making sure that you're creating the right content for the right person and doing it consistently. So obviously there is a ton that we could probably keep talking about as it relates to content. But if what we're kind of offering here, we're going to send all of these resources in the follow-up email as well. But if you guys are wanting more tips on content marketing or how to create an effective strategy that delivers on your goals, feel free to set up a call with us. And if you guys sign up with us before the 22nd of June, you will get $500 off your first month of services with us. So happy to chat through what you guys are looking for, be a resource, and obviously if it makes sense to work together, great. But all of this information will be sent through the email as well.
And in conjunction with that, when you get ready to start promoting all the great content that you've created, you can make sure that your AdWords account, the kind of account to run the ads that Mark was talking about earlier, you can make sure your AdWords account is ready to go. You can grade your AdWords account for free anytime you like, 24/7, available all across the globe at the link below. Again, that's available anytime you like, and you'll have access to this report at no charge. You can refer back to it as many times as you like and share it with your colleagues, track your progress over time. So as you apply some of the techniques you learned here, you can see your score increase over time. Would like now to turn to some questions. It looks like we have a few here. Sorry, just give me one quick second. Natalie, sorry, the GoToWebinar here doesn't seem to be cooperating.
No worries.
Give us one quick second. Good. Okay, here we go. Sorry, this question's for Mark. Your personalized ads example with semantic changes assumes a binary gender audience and ignores potential customers identifying differently. How would you accommodate for something like that?
Yeah, so that is totally fine. Aaron saying this question to me realizes the irony of the question there. But obviously that does assume a heteronormative audience there, right? And that's something that I struggle with someone at times, being someone who is not heteronormative in this kind of relationship here. Google is not going to allow, like, that's a very catered audience, and you wouldn't necessarily want Google to necessarily know that I'm a gay male, or be able to have people target ads to me based off of how Google identifies me. So part of this is, yes, absolutely, you're not going to be able to write a perfect ad to all audiences. But if you wanted to begin talking about how you target to more specific, more complicated demographics, more sensitive demographics, LGBT is not something that you can target specifically on Google. It is something that you can target across all of your social networks. So rather than trying to reach that very catered audience on Google, we can have this conversation more on Facebook. I know that when I'm on Facebook, obviously I reveal more about my personal habits on Facebook and my relationship status on Facebook than someone who is just Googling in general. So I'll give an example. I recently got engaged and got married, and all of a sudden on Facebook, not only did all my ads change from the generic ads that you typically see, but now I have a whole lot of gay wedding ads, and now that I'm married, a whole lot more gay adoption ads, and that kind of content that's a lot more specific to me as someone in that community. It's definitely something that you need to think, as you think about more specific audiences, you need to think about which ad platforms might be the best topic for that. And very similarly, as you're thinking about where online you reach these people, the content that I view online, and Natalie, I'm sure, can back this up a lot, is thinking of how you're reaching that specific audience online and where I'm viewing content versus necessarily a straight couple.
Thank you, Mark. I realize that was a difficult question to answer, and I really do appreciate your taking the time to do so. Next question for Natalie. Question asker says, content is meant for education for sure, but ultimately to meet the needs of the target audience. How can we actualize the use of knowledge to answer our audience's pain points?
Yeah, so if I'm reading this answer correctly, so a lot of those pain points come from collaborative conversations on the sales process. So what if you're talking with a potential customer or potential lead, what questions are they asking you on a consistent basis? This might be like, for instance, with us specifically, I'll use us as an example. A question that I get all the time is, when can I expect leads from my content marketing efforts? That right there in and of itself is a great article that we can write. I'm obviously going to explain it on the phone call, but that's something that that's where we need to educate that audience on what content's role is in the funnel and how quickly they can be expecting results so that when they do become a customer, expectations are aligned. And so like at Influence & Co., we even preach this a lot with our clients, there really needs to be an open dialogue between your marketing and your sales teams. So we talk every single week. We even have like a brainstorm channel. We have Google Docs where it talks about, hey, you know, from the sales team, these are the types of questions that we are getting on a consistent basis. Do we have any content that can support some of these? And a lot of this content that we are creating is coming from our internal subject matter experts, whether that is our CEO, whether that is our director of client success, whether that is coming from a content strategist, whether that is coming from an editor. We're actually kind of crowdsourcing our internal expertise to help create some of this content. And so everybody is kind of their like own expert within their specific field. You know something really, really well. And so it's about kind of crowdsourcing that type of data internally and making it a really easy process to get that insight from your internal team to help create that type of content. And so I think it's extremely key that your marketing and your sales departments are communicating together. I think that it's also key to talk with all of your employees, and each one of them is an expert in their respected areas, and get them excited about sharing their expertise because they are the company, if you will. So that's kind of how we think about that in terms of that whole process. Happy to chat through that more because there's a lot when it comes down to process as well in terms of how do we get some of those key insights from the internal team to help create some of that content. But a lot of the content that we create and a lot of the stuff that I actually talked about today has all come from a question that we have been asked in a sales process from a prospective lead.
Thank you, Natalie. I appreciate that detailed response. We've got time for a few more questions, so if you do have a question, feel free to submit it using the GoToWebinar panel on the right of your screen. And again, just a reminder, the recording will be sent out to all registered, everybody who registered for the webinar tomorrow around midday. I'm going to try some short questions here. Mark, could you talk us through the customer match on Facebook and Google?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the end of the day, this is actually surprisingly simple. Within the Audiences tab of either Facebook, Google, Bing, Twitter, all of the where you see your audiences, you can in fact just upload an Excel list of email addresses or phone numbers or addresses in any of these fields. And then those native platforms have that contact information, and they can generally sync that about 60% of the time back to an individual user. So if I have a list of 1,000 email addresses, then on average, Google can figure out the individual user associated to at least 600 of those. And by having that list, we can then target those individual users based off of that contact information.
Sounds pretty useful. Natalie, a quick question for you. You mentioned early on that there were 3 goals for content marketing, and some people might be wondering, what if my goals don't line up with one of those 3? Or have you found that whatever the goal is, you can, I think, simplify it into meeting one of those 3 categories?
Yeah, I would definitely say 9 times out of 10, you can probably simplify it into one of those 3 categories. That being said, sometimes there are other goals that you want to achieve. For instance, like we have some clients that we work with who they're looking for investment for their startup, and they're like, how do we build credibility around our expertise so that when we do go out and look for funding, we have this like expert content surrounding what we know in the space. And again, when we're looking at content, it's about how do you share your expertise and help you make people make better decisions and ultimately build trust with that. So again, like for the most part, they're likely going to fit into one of those three buckets. There might even be some cross collaboration between lead generation or thought leadership or SEO, but there's definitely times when it can fall outside of that, and that's where it really kind of looks at more of a custom conversation supporting that. But like my philosophy is, if you are sharing your knowledge and sharing what you know about the industry and maybe trends that are going on, or you're even talking about how you lead a company, or different things that you've noticed when you've built your company and scaled it, and you're doing that from the perspective of, I just want to be consistently giving people something of value, like honestly, no matter what your goal is with content, you're going to win. And so that's kind of our philosophy, but that's kind of the response to that. But again, 9 times out of 10 fits into those three buckets, but there are some times where it might fall out of that.
Okay. I mean, it sounds like people have a lot to do and a lot of great material to get started in their content creation and content promotion. We are just at 3 o'clock here, so unfortunately, I'm going to have to end it, but of course, the conversation does not stop here. Please visit influencerandco.com. Please visit wordstream.com and continue to engage with both Natalie and Mark. There's plenty of content at both destinations. Again, the webinar recording will be available tomorrow and emailed out to every registrant. So with that, thank you so much for attending today, and we look forward to the next session.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.